The best leaders are great learners. Today we're talking about how we learn impacts our leadership and our life. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We're here each week to talk about leadership, teamwork, organizational culture, and human potential with experts from every walk of life. Our goal is to help you become the remarkable leader and human being you were born to be. Your host is Kevin Eikenberry, a leadership thought leader, best-selling author, coach, trainer, and consultant to leaders for nearly 25 years. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's upcoming book, The Long Distance Leader, Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. Order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/book. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode number 96 of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, and one of the first ones that we have available via video. So I know most of you are just listening, but you can always go to remarkablepodcast.com and watch us. And my guest today said, if I would have known, Kevin, I would have primped. But if you go and watch, you'll see that it would not have been necessary. Our guest today is Kay Peterson. Let me tell you about Kay. She is the founder of the Institute for Experiential Learning and of Harlan Peterson Partners. She's also a coach and organizational consultant. Her career has included roles like these. Get this: clinical nurse specialist, sales manager, entrepreneur, business owner, CEO, and president of both healthcare and library boards. She's the co-author of a book with David Kolb. It's a great book. It's called How You Learn is How You Live, Using 9 Ways of Learning to Transform Your Life. She has both an MSPOD, I don't know what that is, and an MBA from the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve, an MN from Emory, and a BS from Vanderbilt. So she's freaking smart. And not only that, she's got more certifications than you can shake a stick at, all of which proves that she is definitely a lifelong learner. Kay, I've been waiting a long time for this podcast. I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here too. Thank you, Kevin. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, we have been trying to do this for a while, and every time we'd schedule it, Kay would back off. I don't know. But anyway, I've been looking forward to it. And listen, you are in for a great few minutes. I'm glad to have you here with us, Kay. So I want to start with a question. In the very first line of the intro, it says that you're the founder of the Institute for Experiential Learning. So not everyone listening may really know what that means. What does experiential learning mean? Make that real for people, please.
Kevin, it is a great question. And honestly, I think learning is a word that evokes a lot of things for people. Many people associate it with school and education, formal education. But in reality, experiential learning is a theory and methodology developed by David Kolb some 50 years ago. And although few people think about it, David Kolb actually identified an ideal process of learning and identified that we as learners approach this process differently. And in doing so, we have a learning style, a way of navigating this idealized cycle. So when we think about experiential learning, a lot of people think about service learning or team activities or even ropes courses. And those are ways of applying experiential learning. But the way we apply experiential learning in an organizational and coaching setting is to actually make the process of learning explicit and to help people understand the way they approach it. Because in reality, the way we approach learning is the way we approach life in general. It's how we solve problems, how we lead others, how we make decisions, how we even partner and parent. So,
well, that's the title of the book, How You Learn is How You Live. So that makes some sense. So Dr. Kolb had this sort of learning cycle, and I've been a fan of this cycle for a long time. Can you just share that with people quickly?
Absolutely. And I can share it quickly. And that's one of the real benefits in using this in organizations and coaching It's a 4-step cycle that includes experiencing or feeling, reflecting, thinking, and acting. So in general, we have an experience and we need to connect to it in a direct way. Pay attention to what we're feeling, our 5 senses. Then we step back from that experience and reflect on it to make sense and look at it from different perspectives. From there, we move on to concepts. We create an idea about that experience and compare it to other ideas. And then one of the most important parts of the cycle, and one I know you love very well, is taking action. We have to do something about that, and that creates our next experience.
Well, I
And
hate
so,
to, I hate to say
no,
this,
no.
but if this is people's first episode, they're going to find out that's the last thing I'm going to talk about before the end of this show. And
Okay.
I do every time, because at the end of the day, if we don't do something, like, what's the point? So I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's experience, reflect, think, and act. And I've used that as a leader and as a coach and as an instructor for many years as a way to help think about how do I help people through that process. I know that that's what you guys do a lot. So when we had the chance to meet, approaching a year ago, by the time that this airs, I immediately was drawn to you and wanted to have you on the show. And like I said, it took me a long time to get you here, but I'm not, I'm not too upset about that, Kate, because you're actually here. But I would like you now to, again, taking a hint from the book, 9 ways of learning. So can you talk a little, you've brought up the idea of styles. Let's talk a little bit more about the 9 ways, or at least some of them, to give people a sense of where you're coming from and what this is really all about.
Well, I said that the cycle was very simple, but it's not really that easy. And the reason why is because it's comprised of 2 pairs of opposites. And so I want to give you this as a little bit of background as we go into the styles, because this cycle is the north-south axis is feeling and thinking. And so it's hard to be in the moment feeling something and disengaged from it, thinking about it. Likewise, the way we process information is through reflecting and acting. And so it's hard to be watching and doing at the same time. And the way we creatively manage that ourselves individually, how we enter that cycle and what parts of that cycle we prefer to use and dwell in, defines our learning style. And actually, it's an idealized cycle, Kevin, so it looks very clean, but oftentimes we use it in a much more dynamic way. And the way we choose to use that defines our style. And there are actually 9 ways of doing that. If I can just walk around the cycle real quickly, just to give people an idea, when you're listening to these styles, you might think of them also as steps in any process and in parts of you as a whole person. So when we develop all these styles, we're really developing all parts of ourselves, our feelings, our perceptions, our thoughts, and our actions. And so the styles are experiencing, imagining, reflecting, analyzing, thinking, deciding, acting, initiating, and then there's one also in the middle that's balancing. And so depending on where we enter, how we take in information, and how we process it, it defines our style. And the thing that I think makes the learning styles as defined by Kolb Experiential Learning different than many other styles or ways of typology,
Right.
is that these are not traits. These are more like steady states. It's something that we have practiced and used so much that it's our comfort zone. But it doesn't pigeonhole us. And then something that I see so often in coaching, and this is what makes this such a powerful process, is when we can see the whole, we can see which parts of the cycle and which styles we tend to navigate toward and use, and which we maybe underutilize or avoid even. But so many times I see leaders become aware of this complete picture of themselves, what they can be if they practice. And just the awareness allows them to use many more styles than they typically would.
So I have to tell everybody that several months ago, Miss K gave me their new version of the assessment and then gave me coaching. So this is the first one of these episodes where my guest has like this knowledge about me and that she could probably use against me if she so chose. But in all seriousness, she has a bit of a sense of who I am from having done that. And I really appreciate the coaching that you shared with me about those styles. So, okay, we're in one of these styles. And again, it's different than other sorts of typologies. And yet, in the nature of this conversation, my question to you would be, and my question that I'm sure at least some of those listening would have is, okay, so now what? How do I use that information? Yes. Like, what do I do with that? Right. Okay, great. I'm one of 9. I don't know which I am, or even if I know which one I am, like, how do I use that to be more effective as a learner?
And a leader, I would say too. Well, first of all, Kevin,
well, don't get to my next question. One at a time, Kay. One at a time. Okay.
I'm taking over your style. Well, I think, Kevin, it's one of the most powerful tools for self-awareness that I've ever experienced. And I would love for you to speak to that too. If you, what types of awarenesses you had about your own style and those you prefer and those you maybe avoid or say, although you are highly flexible. So that's not a good question for you. But I think in general, the first thing is self-awareness. And that was the purpose of David and Alice Kolb developing the KLSI, is really a tool for self-awareness. But first, if I know myself, I also then can appreciate others and whose styles may be different than my own, and map out on on this beautiful grid how I might overlap with them, and what types of things we share and what types of approaches we don't share, and understand that in any process we all bring value to this approach. So I think appreciating that we do have an approach and understanding what that approach, the upside and downside the approach brings to any situation, and then also realizing that I can cover others' weaknesses like they can cover mine, and we can bring kind of a deep diversity to any team. So originally, I think, ideally, at the beginning, you surround yourself with people whose styles may be different than your own to become more effective.
Right.
But in the end, ideally, we all want to try to build flexibility to use all the styles in our repertoire. And that's when we can really increase our effectiveness.
All right. So I had a comment I was going to make. I don't remember what it was. So instead, what I'll do is I'll say this. The book is called How You Learn is How You Live, using 9 ways of learning to transform your life. It's exactly what Kay is talking about. So I would say that, and I think when you did some coaching with me, that my observation was that because of the business that I'm in, and because I've been instructing people and trying to understand learning and how to help impact learning for others, that I think I am pretty flexible, and that I can say, hey, I do a lot of these things and can do them. And yet I still have a preference, as you've already hinted and it probably shows through in some ways in how I do this podcast, or maybe even why I do this podcast, I suppose. But I think the key for us is to think about this. You've identified now 2 things. One is, how does this help me? But also, how does it help me understand others? And I think given that this tool is about learning, and given that we as leaders want our team members to be learning, I think it gives us a great frame of reference to consider some things we might not have. And one of the things I love about your work is that you use this in coaching, so that if I can coach people about their style, but I can also use what I know about their style to be a more effective coach for them or with them. And that's sort of how I try to work with it. So now having said that, let me ask you this. How does this relate to us as leaders? Can we be a little more specific and talk about some ways that these insights can be helpful to me as a leader?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think as leaders, our job is to really become whole people. And this, I think, is a very holistic process. I mean, we can use this process in any situation, but also we use all parts of ourselves when we're using it. And so as we become more flexible, we actually know that learning flexibility, the ability to use all 9 styles or to meet different situations and context, actually is linked to later stages of adult development. It's linked to understanding more, having more handle on complexity. It's linked to effectiveness in sales situations. And not to underestimate, it's also linked to being happier. So I think as we become more flexible as leaders and learners, we have more choice in any situation. And so we face situations as they appear. And I think also this fact that the cycle requires us to deal with paradox and opposites. And so we're actually experiencing what it's like to be in a dilemma when we're reflecting and acting. And I think in leadership, that is, as you know, Kevin, with all your writing and everything, I know you're very aware of this idea of managing dilemmas and not just solving simple problems, and how that's going to be even more important in years to come. And so we actually have the experience of managing that, of both and. And then finally, I think this is not just a theory of learning, but it's a theory of development. And so as leaders, we want to know how to face challenges. And this allows us to a map and a process to use as we face challenges.
Yeah, and gives us tools to face them more effectively, from more perspectives and all those sorts of things. I think that's exactly right. You know, in my book, Remarkable Leadership, I wrote something like being a better leader makes us a better human and vice versa. And that's what you just said, that this idea that as we become a better learner, we become a better leader. All these things are hooked together. And so that's why I was so excited to have you on this podcast. Finally.
Kevin,
okay, that's the last time I'll say it, I promise.
So I wonder if that's learning style related too. Anyway, but in your book also, From Bud to Boss, a central theme is learning.
Yeah,
How you
absolutely.
learning a new role and meeting those challenges differently. So that was a very central theme, I think, in From Bud to Boss as well.
Yeah, I think that that's right. Now, so as a leader, we've hinted a little bit about this idea that if I understand these styles, and of course, we can't help you get all the way to understanding these styles in this podcast. We're whetting your appetite before you go out and buy your copy of How You Learn.
How you learn
is how you live, using 9 styles. Use 9 ways of learning to transform your life. I keep wanting to use the word style. And by the way, if you can, all the links are here in the show notes. If you can't find it or you're walking, you can come back later and find all that. But as a leader, we hinted earlier about this idea about our role as a coach and how do I help others learn and develop more effectively. Now, I have the situation, as do many of the people who are listening to us, Kay, that they are leading a team who's remote from them. Not all of them. Now, I've had the good fortune, I think 1, 2, 3, 4 of my team members have been here at one point or another today. That's still less than half of the total, about a third of the total. And some of these folks I'm not seeing very often. A lot of people listening are in the same boat. And even then, once I start to get a handle on these styles for myself, and if I want to use some of this to lead more effectively with others, especially if they're remote from me, what are some clues that I can use to help me be more effective in helping them as it relates to these styles?
Oh, Kevin, that is a great question. And in fact, I find that applying this at the team level is so powerful. And with the additional challenges of running remote teams, it can be even more valuable and critical to success. So I would start with identifying each individual member's learning style and creating a map to show where we prefer to be on the learning cycle. And that will really make a difference as you are progressing through the team process. In any team process, there is a period of creation or kind of idea generation. Then you're planning, and then making some decisions, and then taking action on any project you're managing. So you can actually overlay the styles on a step in the team process. You will then know what members can take leadership at different points in the process. So you'll be able, as a leader, to share leadership and also know what parts of the process your team might be likely to skip over or underutilize.
Yep.
And be explicit about stopping there, so to speak. The other thing I think that it also can help us with, because this is such a great model, a holistic model, it includes things like introversion, extroversion. It includes diverging, converging. It includes content and context. And so you can actually be aware of people's roles on teams, who will, when someone maybe isn't as likely to participate, their role may be actually to make sure everyone does participate. And when
Right.
you can be explicit about creating these roles from the beginning, actually empowers all the team members. So,
Well, everybody, I mentioned that leading remotely because I do it, and I wrote a book about it along with Wayne Trammell. And this book you can pre-order it now if you're listening when this first comes out, or even later. I'm going to give you a link, everybody. It's remoteleadershipinstitute.com/pre-order. And there's a bonus that you can get if you pre-order your book. And if you're listening to this after the book comes out, the link's still going to work. So remoteleadershipinstitute.com/pre-order. Now, Kay, I have a section that I've been doing with guests pretty much since I started here. I'm calling it the fast break. What I have for you are 3 ideas, and I'm going to give you the idea, and I want you to give us your thoughts about it, what's important about it. It's like top of mind, whatever you want to say about each of these 3 things. Are you ready?
I am ready.
She's sitting down. She's ready. First one is style.
Style. I think of style as being preference or approach. And when I think of style, I love to think of variation and flexibility, so that we're not locked in a pigeonhole. We are lifelong learners and can change style in different contexts and at different times in our lives.
All right. Second one, related. This is the real softball. Are you ready? Lifelong learning.
Yeah, well, I think it's a key to life. And there is a magical component, I think, to lifelong learning when we learn from experience. When we can connect with our experience and stay true to what really excites us and keep on that path, I think that doors open where we don't even know they exist.
All right. And the last one is change.
Well, I equate change with learning. And in fact, David Kolb would say his learning cycle is actually a model of adaptation. And so when we know how to learn, we actually know how to change as well.
Because if we're learning, we're going to be changing, right? So they all hook together. Okay. So
Absolutely.
When I introduced you, I talked about all of these certifications, and you've written books and you've started businesses. You're doing all this stuff. You're a busy person, Kay. So my question to you is, what do you do for fun when you're not working?
Oh, well, when it's nice here in Cleveland, Ohio.
All 3 days? Oh
Kevin,
man, I just got all of my friends in Cleveland upset with me. I'm teasing. Go ahead. When it's nice in Cleveland, go ahead.
We have the most beautiful summers in the world, and I play golf every day I can. And in fact, a lot of the ideas for the book came from our golf foursome, where David Kolb and I play golf with 2 other people. So that I love to play golf. When it's not so nice in Cleveland, I I still walk as much as I can. And I actually have started ballroom dancing as a way to do
There
something
you go.
inside that's active.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
And my second to last question for you, Kay, is what are you reading now, or what have you read recently that you might share with everybody?
Oh, I'm reading a great book by Daniel Pink. I like his writing so much. I'm reading When. Have you read that, Kevin?
It's on my list,
Yeah.
and this
On
is
your
the
list.
second week in a row on this podcast, everybody, that
Really?
book has been
Oh, I like it
been
very much.
recommended. Yep.
One of the things I like about his writing so much is he blends research and storytelling in
Yep.
beautifully.
Yes, he
And I
does.
think he's got some great new concepts in there. And then I also am just finishing up a novel, A Gentleman in Moscow, that I highly recommend. It's just great reading. Um,
I can't say this 100% for sure, but I am pretty sure that another past guest has recommended that book as well. I'm
okay.
I'm almost positive that that is true. But anyway, so
It's a
that's
solid,
awesome,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that says something about UK that you're reading both fiction and nonfiction as a part of
Oh,
that holistic view as well. So
oh.
the question that you've been really wanting me to ask all along, that you've been waiting for me to ask, is this: where can people learn more about you and your work and the book?
Uh, yes, we have a website, experientiallearninginstitute.org. That's certainly a place to start. We offer online programs in experiential learning. We certainly consult and coach and do group programs in organizations and professional service firms. Um, and David and I completed a new workbook that goes along with How You Learn is How You Live. So it's a personal development guide. And we also have a community of practice for people who are interested in learning more about experiential learning to apply as coaches and organization development professionals, HR professionals. So that's a great place to start, and we love to connect with people.
Awesome. And so it's okay. I want to thank you for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. I've been looking forward to it, as I said before. And so now for all of you who are listening, the question is, now what? About 30 minutes of conversation here about how we learn and some tools and some ideas, some anchors to put together about how that works and how to think more about that. So what action are you going to take as a result of this? Kay's given you some ideas about how to do this with your team, as well as some things for yourself. Where are you going to start? What action are you going to take as a result of our time together? Because as pleasant as listening to Kay and I might be, at the end of the day, hopefully you're going to get more from it than just that. So you can reflect on it and think about it. But we hope that at some point you will also take some action. So Kay, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Kevin. It was really a pleasure to talk with you today.
And so everybody, we do this every week. And so if this is your first time, don't make it your last time. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you'd like to get more involved in what we're doing here with this podcast, if you'd like to even have a hand in who we have or what we do on this podcast, you can do that by joining our Facebook group. It's very simple. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook and you can join us there. And we'll be here every week. And you can go back and binge watch back 90 some episodes, but we're going to be here every week, helping you be a more effective leader, helping you be a more confident leader, helping you be a more productive leader. Thanks for being with you. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks.